Dear students, welcome to E-Pathshala. Today we shall be discussing Solid Waste Management Rules 2016, enactment of these rules, history and implementation of these rules. And also we will be discussing how the judiciary has helped us in the implementation of these rules. So the scheme of the presentation will be, we will be first discussing the evolution of solid waste management rules in brief, and then we will be discussing the application of these rules, the responsibilities and duties of various stakeholders under these rules of 2016, and we will also be discussing the approaches under this solid waste management rules of 2016, that is what will be the criteria for waste to energy process and rules regarding hilly areas. We will also be discussing the judicial perspective and how judiciary has helped us in implementation of solid waste management rules. Starting with the introduction to municipal solid waste management rules. If we all look at municipal solid waste management is very critical for ensuring the clean environment in cities in particular. Municipal solid waste, the studies have depicted that 90% of the management of municipal solid waste is unscientific, which is causing a major environmental hazard to the inhabitants. So therefore, the proper management of municipal solid waste is very important for the sustainable development of the metropolitans and sustainable development of the cities. When we talk about solid waste management, it includes segregation of the waste, storage of waste, collection of waste, transportation of that waste for processing, and disposal of the waste in such a manner that it does not have adverse impact on environment or to minimize the adverse impacts on the environment. The thrust of solid waste management rules is on the research. So how this waste can be utilized, how this waste can be converted into energy. So therefore, the developing countries are conducting or are engaged in a lot of research to how this refuse-driven fuel can be obtained from solid waste so that it can be properly utilized. Studies have proven that reutilization of solid waste is socially, economically and environmentally important and desirable in order to prevent the damage to the environment and also to ensure the proper management of solid waste so that it does not have adverse effects on the inhabitants. And if we look at the scenario in India and abroad, we find that about 12 million tons of inert waste is generated annually in India, and which is sent to landfill sites, and therefore it occupies around 1/3 of the total municipal solid waste. In India, people residing in urban areas, they generate around 62 million tons of municipal solid waste per annum, and it is projected, as per the report of the Planning Commission of 2014, that by 2031, the urban centers will be generating about 165 million tons of waste annually, and it is expected to cross 436 million tons by 2050. If you look at the report of Central Pollution Control Board for 2015-16, which is submitted only in May 2017, that report has shown that 135,198 tons per day of solid waste is generated, and of which only 82% is collected. Of the collected waste, 25,572 tons per day is treated. That means 23% of the waste is treated and the balance is sent to landfill sites. So this is a very poor scenario. We are not treating the entire municipal solid waste. We are treating only a fraction of municipal waste, and the majority of the municipal solid waste is getting filled unscientifically in landfill sites and dumps, which is causing a serious environmental hazard, not only to the inhabitants of that area, but it is also affecting seriously all of us. We have seen that these dump sites, the fires are taking place there. The material is burnt over there and fires are going on for days altogether, whereas the governments are turning a blind eye to this problem. that is polluting the environment, choking the cities, and is causing serious environmental and health hazard for not only for the inhabitants of the towns and cities nearby, but also for the entire community. Solid waste management rules, they have emanated in India due to judicial pressures and judicial intervention. The decision of the Supreme Court in ALMITRA H. Patel versus Union of India in 2000, that proved to be an important milestone for the development of, for the evolution of solid waste management rules in India. In this case, a writ petition was filed regarding management of municipal solid waste in 4 metropolitan cities, that is Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta and Delhi. And it was pointed out that the municipalities, they have been found deficient in dealing with municipal solid waste. The practices adopted by them were unscientific, and therefore the Supreme Court of India asked the state pollution control boards to submit their reports. On the basis of the proceedings in the court, a committee was appointed headed by Mr. Asim Burman to look into the aspects of solid waste management. And the committee suggested various ways in March 1999, and they submitted their reports to the court. Under this report, responsibilities of various stakeholders, they were specified. And that proved, as I said, catalyst in evolution of solid waste management rules. So the solid waste management rules emanated basically from the judgment of the Supreme Court, and then the legislature was sort of compelled to enact solid waste management rules, and legislature responded by enacting solid waste management rules 2000. These rules have been revamped, restructured and repromulgated in 2016 and have been notified on 8th of April 2016, replacing Solid Waste Management and Handling Rules 2000. The aim of these rules is to update and amend the solid waste management rules, and these rules impose obligations upon various stakeholders, not only to minimize the municipal solid waste, but also to recycle that and manage the waste in such a manner which is eco-friendly, environment-friendly, and which protects the health and the environment. These rules have been made applicable to state governments, central government organizations, state government organizations, outgrowths in urban agglomerations, census towns declared by the Registrar General and Census Commissioners of India, not only to the towns but also to census towns, to every urban local body, to notified areas, to notified industrial townships, airports, air bases, religious and historical places, areas under the control of Indian Railways, every domestic, institutional, commercial and any other non-residential solid waste generator situated in India. That means to all domestic places, to institutions, commercial institutions, non-commercial institutions, residential waste generators. Also, these rules have been made applicable to ports, harbors, pilgrimage places, defense establishments, and special economic zones. The rules contemplate and obligate various stakeholders to perform various duties. The foremost, of course, is the duty of the waste generator. All of us, whether we are living in a residential accommodation, or whether we are a commercial institution, or we are an educational institution, or whatever, all of us are generating waste in varying degrees. So all of us are waste generators. So therefore, duty is cast upon the waste generators. The first thing which they have to do is to segregate the waste. That means we need to see that the biodegradable waste is segregated from non-biodegradable waste, and then domestic hazardous waste is also separated. So that is why the rules of 2016, they contemplate 3 bins. One for biodegradable waste, one for hazardous waste, and one for non-degradable waste. So this waste first is to be segregated by the waste generator, and then it is to be handed over to authorized waste picker or waste collector. And horticulture, garden waste is to be separately stored in the premises. Construction and demolition waste is to be separately stored, and of course that is to be dealt with. Construction and demolition waste management rules of 2016. Importantly, solid waste management rules of 2016 have also dealt with a critical area, that is used sanitary pads and diapers, etc. We have seen that so far these sanitary pads, used sanitary pads and diapers, they were mixed in the solid waste without being packed, without being wrapped, and therefore the waste pickers used to, they used to have various health problems, face various health problems, because they used to pick this waste with their naked hands. That is why 2016 rules have contemplated that used sanitary pads and diapers, etc., they are to be packed and wrapped safely, either in the pouches, which is the responsibility of the manufacturers or the producers to provide along with the product itself, or they are to be wrapped in a material safely as may be prescribed from time to time. So waste generators, they are to ensure that they do not litter the waste on streets, public places and roads, etc. And of course, the burning of solid waste on open public spaces or streets is totally prohibited. It is also to be ensured by the waste generator that solid waste is not thrown in drains or water bodies, because there is a practice in various parts of the country to throw this solid waste in drains, clogging the drains, or to throw this waste in the water bodies. So as we discussed, that duties have been imposed on all the stakeholders, whether that is the individual waste generator or institutional waste generator. Similarly, duties are obligated, or duties are cast upon event organizers. If we look at event organizers, sometimes or most of the times we organize certain events, religious events, social events or commercial events in open spaces. That is why the rules contemplate that all events or gatherings of more than 100 persons at a place which is not licensed by the municipal bodies, they should be held after prior notification, prior intimation to the municipal bodies. Intimation has to be sent at least 3 days in advance. That means you have to obtain prior consent, and prior intimation has to be sent to the local bodies if you are going to conduct any event of more than 100 persons. If that is to be conducted at a licensed place, there is no such obligation. But if that is to be conducted at an unlicensed place in open, then there is an obligation on the event organizer to send that intimation at least 3 days in advance. And then after the event, they have to ensure that the waste generated in such gatherings, that is to be segregated at source, and that is to be handed over to the waste pickers, authorized waste pickers, as per the rules of the collection agencies, as the case may be. Similarly, street vendors, they also play an important role. Sometimes they litter the waste, especially when we look at street vendors which are selling food and foodstuffs or items pertaining to food items. So they are mandated to keep containers or bins for storage of waste, and then they are required to deposit that waste at the waste storage depot or container or vehicle as may be notified by the local authorities from time to time. Now, important duties are cast upon resident welfare associations, market associations, hotels and restaurants, that they have to ensure and make arrangements within 1 year from the date of notification of these rules to ensure that the waste is segregated at source and that is stored in separate bins, as we said, that biodegradable separately, non-biodegradable, and then hazardous waste is to be stored separately. And then they have to hand over the recyclable or residual waste to the authorized waste collector or waste picker. So far as biodegradable waste is concerned, the provisions are made for on-site utilization of that biodegradable waste, and that is why the rules provide that these associations or the hotels and restaurants, they have to make arrangements for treatment and disposal of this biodegradable waste through composting or biomethanation within the premises on site. And this arrangement they can make on their own, or they can make this arrangement in partnership with the local bodies. So within 1 year from the date of notification of these rules, the resident welfare associations or maybe the gated communities and institutions with more than 5,000 square meter area, they have to make arrangements that the biodegradable waste is composted or that is used by biomethanation and that is disposed of on site, and the rest of the waste is handed over, non-biodegradable and recyclable, that is handed over to the authorized waste pickers or collection agents. Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change is empowered and is bestowed with the responsibility of monitoring the implementation of Solid Waste Management Rules 2016, and the Ministry has been empowered to constitute a center level monitoring committee comprising of Secretary of Ministry as the chairman and officer not below the rank of Joint Secretary or advisor from Ministry of Urban Development, Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, Ministry of Agriculture, and C.P.C.B., that is Central Pollution Control Board. This apart, 3 state pollution control boards on rotation basis, members have to be taken from them. Urban development departments of 3 state governments by rotation, they are to be represented. Then village development departments from 2 state governments by rotation, they have to be opted as members, and 3 urban local bodies by rotation, they can also be taken as members. This apart, census towns, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Confederation of Indian Industry, and subject experts, 2 subject experts are also to be included as members in that center level monitoring committee. Rules provide that center level monitoring committee shall meet at least once in a year to review the implementation of solid waste management rules. However, the National Green Tribunal in December 2016, by its order in ALMITRA H. Patel vs. Union of India, has directed the Center Monitoring Committee to meet at least once in 3 months to review the implementation of solid waste management rules. Minutes of these meetings are to be placed in public domain, and whatever directions have been given on the basis of the minutes, they are to be issued immediately and to be put in public domain so that one and all can know their responsibilities. The committee has to be reconstituted, renewed every 3 years. Rules have also cast certain duties on center ministries. These center ministries include Urban Development Ministry, Power Ministry, Agriculture Ministry, etc. If we look at the Center Ministry of Urban Development, they have been mandated to formulate national policy on solid waste management within 6 months from the date of notification of solid waste management rules. They are to formulate the policy on waste to energy within 6 months, because as we said, the better utilization of solid waste management is either it is recycled or it is used in a manner that it is used to generate energy or generate fuel. So waste to energy plants, they are proposed to be established under the rules, and the Ministry of Urban Development is mandated to formulate national policy in this regard. However, if we look at the actual implementation briefly here, these rules have not been implemented as such, in letter and spirit as such, though the efforts have been made, and it has been noted by the National Green Tribunal in December 2016 in ALMITRA H. Patel, and therefore the NGT has said even 6 months have passed, the time period is over, but then rules have not been notified, and therefore they have extended the period. They said the period for the 6 months that is to be reckoned, that is to start from 1st of January 2017, because 6 months had already expired. So they gave further time, and they directed that now we will not be giving the extension of time. The ministry, they have to discharge their functions immediately, frame these rules so that, and guidelines, so that they can be implemented by the implementation agencies. The ministry is also required to take reviews and revision of measures taken under solid waste management rules at least once in a year. Whatever projects are funded by a ministry regarding solid waste management, revision and review of those projects have to be taken at least once in a year. Of course, the states and union territories, they should be helped by the ministry, Central Ministry of Urban Development, in formation of the state policies and strategies regarding solid waste management. Further, the ministry has been directed by the rules to encourage, promote and support research and development in solid waste management, to disseminate information to states and local bodies, to organize and undertake training programs, to undertake programs for capacity building of local bodies, to provide technical and expert guidance and help to states, union territories and local bodies, and to provide financial support to states, union territories and local bodies regarding the solid waste management. Various other duties have been cast upon the central ministries like the Ministry of Department of Fertilizers, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. Now, fertilizer control order is required to be issued by Ministry of Agriculture, and in that fertilizer control order, Ministry of Agriculture along with Ministry of Department of Fertilizers or Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, they are to ensure that there is sufficient laxity, sufficient flexibility in that order, because as we said, on-site biodegradable waste is required to be dealt with, required to be processed and treated, and that is why the provisions have been made in the rules that compost shall be made on site, and therefore the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers is to ensure the promotion of the co-marketing of compost with the chemical fertilizers in the prescribed proportion. That means 3 to 4 bags of compost is to 6-7 bags of chemical fertilizers. In that proportion, the marketing and promotion of compost which is generated as per solid waste management rules, that is to be done by the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. And of course, they are to help in the development of market for city compost which is generated under solid waste management rules. As we discussed, that the thrust of these rules is to make energy from the refuse, to make energy from the waste, and that is where the Ministry of Power can play an important part in that, and that is why duty is cast upon the Ministry of Power that they are to provide that whatever energy is generated, they have to declare the tariff of that energy which is generated from energy plants which are based on waste to energy plants which are based on solid waste, and they are to ensure that the power distribution companies compulsorily purchase at least a specified percentage of the energy which is generated from RDF or maybe refuse driven fuel, or maybe energy which is generated from waste to energy plants which are based on solid waste. Ministry of New and Renewable Energy Resources, they are required to provide subsidy and incentive to waste to energy plants which are based on solid waste, and also to facilitate the creation of infrastructure for waste to energy plants. Agriculture Ministry, as we said, that they are also required to perform certain functions, because fertilizer control order that is required to be issued by them. In that fertilizer control order, some flexibilities in the city compost which is generated from the municipal solid waste, that is required to be given. The ministry is to help in setting up of laboratories for testing the quality of city compost, and to promote and propagate utilization of compost, and therefore they have also to recommend the proportion in which the city compost is to be used in proportion to chemical fertilizers. So far as Ministry of Urban Development, Department of States and Union Territories are concerned, they play a very, very important role, because ultimately the local authorities are under the Urban Development Department, and therefore the basic duties are of local authorities. So Urban Development Department, that is responsible to prepare state policy regarding state solid waste management. This is to be prepared in consultation with all the stakeholders, that is the NGOs, waste pickers and other stakeholders in the state. Of course, this policy is required to be consistent with the national policy. The state plan is required to be prepared within 1 year, but as we have discussed that the tardy implementation of these rules, and that is why the period had to be extended by the National Green Tribunal in ALMITRA as PATEL to be reckoned from 1st of July 2017, because the Urban Development Department of various states are not ready with the state plans. So extensions have been given, but it has further been provided by NGT that we are not going to give any further extensions. The policy of the state should be to minimize the waste, and whatever waste is generated, to recycle that, reuse that, recover material from them, and utilize the solid waste in a manner which is eco-friendly. And of course, for the recycling and for disposal facilities, the Urban Development Department is to identify the land where these facilities can be set up, and that is to be done within 1 year, which is to be reckoned from 1st of July 2017. It is the duty of Urban Development Department to ensure that solid waste management rules are implemented by local authorities properly and in letter and spirit. Further, they are to ensure that whenever any city is planned, or in the master plan of all the cities, waste treatment, processing and disposal facility, these requirements are embodied in the master plan of each city. Similarly, when the town planning department or local bodies, they are making their development plans for group housing, commercial institutions or non-residential complexes exceeding 200 dwellings or having a plot area of more than 5,000 square meters, then they have to provide in those plans space for segregation, storage and processing of solid waste. Ministry is also required to issue necessary directions to special economic zone developers and developers of industrial parks to earmark at least 5% area for recovery and recycling facility. In consultation with the State Pollution Control Board, Urban Development Department is required to notify the buffer zone for waste processing facility of more than 5 tons per day. That means wherever the waste processing facility whose capacity is more than 5 tons per day is there, then there has to be a buffer zone, specific buffer zone within which no construction or no residential area should be there. How much that buffer zone should be there, that is to be notified by the Urban Development Department. UDD is also required to make provision for capacity building of local bodies and to help them creating an infrastructure. They are to facilitate the establishment of common regional landfill facility for a cluster of towns or group of cities which are falling within 50 kilometers on cost sharing basis. And of course, as we said, all stakeholders have to be integrated and their involvement is desirable for the effective implementation of waste management rules, and therefore the scheme for registration of waste pickers and waste dealers have to be promulgated by the Ministry of Urban Development Department of the state governments or union territories. So far as the district magistrates and district deputy collectors are concerned, they are required to review the performance of local bodies at least once in each quarter regarding the management of solid waste. And since the land is to be provided for establishment of solid waste treatment, processing and disposal facility, district magistrate or deputy collector, they are required to help the local bodies and Urban Development Department to identify that land where these facilities can be provided. Central Pollution Control Board has to play an important role. It formulates the policies, the standards and norms for solid waste processing and disposal facilities, and it lays down the norms regarding emission of pollution standards in these facilities, that is norms regarding air pollution, water pollution and noise pollution. These norms have to be reviewed and updated from time to time by the Central Pollution Control Board, and the review has to be done by them at least once in a year. State Pollution Control Board, the coordination has to be done with various state pollution control boards regarding solid waste management by the Central Pollution Control Board, and whatever proposals are submitted by S.P.C.Bs or maybe pollution control committees regarding new technologies in solid waste management, those proposals are to be reviewed by the Central Pollution Control Board, and accordingly they have to prescribe the norms and standards for following those projects. Central Pollution Control Board is also required to publish guidelines regarding the maintenance of management of solid waste, to get the annual reports from state pollution control boards, and on the basis of those reports to prepare an annual report which is to be submitted to Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. They are also required to publish guidelines regarding buffer zone, to provide guidance to states regarding solid waste management. Now we shall be discussing the duties of State Pollution Control Board. State Pollution Control Board is to ensure that solid waste management rules are implemented properly, and they are to review the implementation of these rules at least twice a year. Of course, the annual reports are to be prepared by the State Pollution Control Board, and they are required to be sent to the Central Pollution Control Board. And the State Pollution Control Board is to act as a monitoring agency to ensure that the standards and guidelines issued by the Central Pollution Control Board, they are adhered to, they are complied with in the state. As we discussed in the beginning, that registration is required to be done. So if any solid waste treatment facility is to be established, that is to be registered, authorization is required to be obtained from the local bodies. So whatever authorizations applications have to be filed with the appropriate prescribed authorities for getting the authorization, getting the consent for operating treatment facilities or disposal facilities. Those applications, those are to be examined and approved by the S.P.C.B. within 60 days of the date of receipt of those applications. The local bodies are required to establish the facilities for disposal and treatment of solid waste. So therefore they will be moving that application with the State Pollution Control Board, which is to be evaluated and granted or otherwise by the State Pollution Control Board. These authorizations can be revoked, they can be suspended, they can be cancelled at any time if the State Pollution Control Board finds that the adherence to solid waste management rules is not there, or if they find that these rules are violated and are not complied with, then after giving reasonable opportunity of being heard, they can cancel or suspend these authorizations. The authorizations are for a specified period which is specified in the authorization. After the expiry, before the expiry of the authorization, the local bodies are required to apply for a renew of that authorization, and the State Pollution Control Board is authorized that it will deal with those applications if the entity is complying with the solid waste management rules. Then the renewal is to be granted. Otherwise, the State Pollution Control Board can refuse to grant authorization. Interstate movement of solid waste is to be regulated by the State Pollution Control Board. So far as solid waste is concerned, or which was earlier referred to as municipal solid waste. Now this solid waste, the basic liability is of the local bodies, whether they are urban local bodies or they are village panchayats, because they are at the grassroots level and they are to collect the solid waste. And therefore the rules have cast various responsibilities on local authorities and village panchayats regarding solid waste management. The importance of 2016 rules is that they have extended the application of these rules to village panchayats also, not only to village panchayats but also to census towns and urban agglomerations. And these local authorities, village panchayats, etc., they play an important link in the implementation of these rules, and they are to formulate plan for solid waste management in accordance with the state policy. The time period is fixed in the notification, but of course as we have noticed that National Green Tribunal found that the states have not prepared their plans within the period of 6 months. So therefore, once the state plan is prepared, in accordance with the state plan, the local authorities are also to prepare the policy for dealing with the solid waste management for the areas under their control, and that must be in compliance with the state plan. They are to ensure that the workers who are involved in the collection of the segregated waste, they are trained properly, they are educated, they are to ensure that the rules are properly implemented. They are to make arrangements for collection of segregated waste on door-to-door basis from households, from slums, from commercial buildings, from institutions and other premises, including informal settlements. And as we discussed earlier, that the waste pickers, the waste generators, the kabadiwalas or the waste collectors, they have to be integrated, and their participation has to be ensured to facilitate the implementation of solid waste management rules. And for this purpose, they can levy a user fee, and the waste generator is required to pay this user fee to the local body, so that this money can be utilized for development of waste collection and management system. As we discussed that the local bodies, they play an important part. They are to incorporate solid waste management rules and policies in their bylaws, and of course they have to implement them properly. They have to submit their annual reports to State Pollution Control Board regarding the management, treatment and disposal of solid waste, and they have to educate, spread public awareness among the waste generators, and they have to educate the waste generators, issue directions to them regarding the implementation of solid waste management rules. As we discussed that biodegradable solid waste, that is to be converted into compost on site itself. Therefore, the local bodies have been mandated to ensure that this city compost is used in all parks which are maintained or gardens which are maintained by the local authority, and therefore a mandate is given to them that they have to phase out the use of chemical fertilizers in the parks and gardens which are maintained by the local authority, and they have to use this city compost in those parks and gardens as manure. These authorities are also required to set up plants for recovery of material from the solid waste and to provide secondary storage facilities for this purpose. We discussed that waste is to be segregated at source. It is the duty of the waste generator to segregate the source at waste and to put that into different bins. So, three types of bins are prescribed: green for biodegradable waste, white for storage of recyclable waste, and black for storage of other waste. The municipalities, local authorities and gram panchayats, they are required to provide easy access to waste pickers and recyclers for collection of segregated recyclable waste such as paper, plastic, metal, glass, textile from the source of generation or from material recovery facilities so that it can be channelized. They are to ensure safe storage and transportation of hazardous waste to disposal facility, and to establish centers for depositing domestic hazardous waste, and to instruct the waste generators not to use this hazardous waste, not to mix it, contaminate it with the other waste. There should be at least one center for every 20 square kilometers, and this is the duty of the local authorities and the panchayats to ensure that one such center is established. We have seen that the waste is burnt in open, especially the leaves of tree. They are burnt in open. So it is the duty of the local authorities to ensure that the appropriate directions are issued to sweepers not to burn tree leaves and store them separately so that they can be handed over to waste collectors. They have to ensure that sanitary landfills, they are constructed, and the operation and maintenance of sanitary landfills is also the duty of local authorities. These sanitary landfills, when they are being constructed or operated, they shall meet the criteria which is prescribed under these rules and under various other rules. Also, they shall be in compliance with the norms and guidelines issued by the central and state pollution control boards from time to time. So far as the local bodies are concerned, they have to ensure that not all waste goes to the sanitary landfill sites or to the dumping sites. Only that waste which is non-usable, which is non-recyclable, which is non-biodegradable, which is non-combustible and non-reactive inert waste which is left, that should be sent to sanitary landfill. It is to be ensured by the local authorities and gram panchayats, etc., that the workers which are working in the landfill sites or in the disposal facilities, they are given adequate protection gears, adequate protection equipment, so that same are being used by them for their safety. It is also to be ensured that these landfill sites, sanitary landfill sites, they are scientifically capped so as to prevent damage to the environment, unless there are arrangements for biomining and bioremediation of dump sites. Local authorities have also to ensure that they make necessary arrangement for collection of waste from street sweeping on daily basis or on alternative basis or on twice a week basis, depending upon the availability and depending upon the waste generated. So far as the biodegradable waste is concerned, like vegetable waste generated regarding vegetables, fruit, meat, poultry, fish market, that is to be collected on daily basis, and it is the duty of the urban local bodies and village panchayats to ensure and that compost plants or biomethanation plant is established in the vicinity so that the compost is generated in the vicinity itself. In these compost plants, the hygienic conditions are required to be ensured by the local bodies. And so far as the horticulture waste is concerned, which is generated in parks and gardens, that is to be processed at the on-site itself. So the local bodies are also required to make arrangement for the transportation of biodegradable waste to compost plants or biomethanation plants or other facilities. And as we discussed, that the facilities for biodegradable waste, for converting them into compost, they should be provided on site. Non-biodegradable waste is to be transported to secondary storage facilities so that the materials can be recovered therein and the rest can be sent to the disposal facility. And the transportation has to be safe and secure, and this is the responsibility of local authorities and village panchayats. And in performing their responsibilities, they have to ensure that all the communities, the self-help groups or the NGOs, their participation is ensured, not only in promotion of home composting, biogas generation, but also in ensuring that odor and smell that is not there, the people who are living in the vicinity. Also, the hygienic conditions are required to be maintained. The construction and demolition waste has to be disposed of as per the construction and demolition waste rules of 2016. The capital investment is required to be made for the operation, maintenance, for the construction of solid waste management and treatment facilities, and this is the duty of local authorities to generate adequate funds for making capital investment therein. If any solid waste management plant, if its capacity exceeds 5 tons per day, then it is required to make an application for authorization for processing, treatment and disposal, and application is to be made to the local authorities. This application has to be made at least 60 days before the date of expiry of the authorization already granted to them. Manufacturers or brand owners have also been obligated to perform various functions under solid waste management rules. Duties have been cast upon them to ensure that, for example, when we talk about sanitary napkins or diapers, in their cases, the producers, they are required to provide pouches or wrappers so that these sanitary napkins and diapers, used diapers, they can be wrapped in those pouches or they can be disposed of only in the pouches or the wrapping which is provided. Brand owners have to ensure to make a system for collection of non-biodegradable waste which is emanating from the packing of their products. And these manufacturers and brand owners are required to give financial assistance and to collaborate with the local authorities for developing solid waste management systems. The responsibility to educate the waste generator that lies with not only with the local authorities but also on the manufacturers and brand owners. So far as the industries which are located within 100 kilometers of a plant which is waste to energy plant based on solid waste, or within 100 kilometers of RDF, that is refuse derived fuel, they are required to replace at least 5% of their fuel requirements from these plants within 6 months from the date of notification. That means it has been mandated now that at least 5% of the energy that should be purchased from waste to energy plants. Time frame has been provided in the rules for implementation of various obligations. For example, the obligation to recognize a landfill site, the time period is 1 year. The procurement of waste processing facilities within 2 years. Ensuring segregation of waste 2 years from the date of notification of the rules. So far as the cities which are having a population of a million plus, 3 years time period is given. So the cities with the population up to 1 million, the time frame is 2 years. Setting up of sanitary landfills, 3 years. And bioremediation or capping of old landfill sites, the period is 5 years. Various authorities have been set up who are required to renew the implementation of these rules from time to time. And in this regard, the Ministry of Environment and Forests is required to ensure that the rules are reviewed from time to time. Now, having discussed that solid waste management rules have laid down the responsibilities of various stakeholders, let us see how these rules have been implemented. If we look at the decision of the National Green Tribunal in ALMITRA H. PATEL versus Union of India, which was given in December 2016, we find that these rules have not been implemented in letter and spirit. Even the meetings have not been held, the committees have not been constituted, the rules have not been notified, the policies have not been notified. Therefore, long list of guidelines, 28 guidelines were issued by NGT, National Green Tribunal, to the state governments, to these state pollution control boards and central pollution control boards. These guidelines include that every state and union territory, they should enforce solid waste management rules in all aspects without any further delay, to prepare an action plan in terms of these rules and in accordance with the directions of the judgment of the NGT within 4 weeks from the date of announcement of this judgment, and to ensure that national policy regarding solid waste management is made within 6 months from 1st of January 2017. The NGT has mandated that if any state or union territory fails to comply with the statutory obligations under the rules and given by the NGT, then they shall be liable to be proceeded against. Appropriate action can be initiated against them under Section 15 of the Environment Protection Act. And if any state or union territory is not abiding by these regulations, they shall be liable to pay environmental compensation as may be imposed by the National Green Tribunal. Personal responsibility has been fixed. That is, the senior most officer in charge of the state government, urban local body, he shall be liable to be personally proceeded against if violation of these rules takes place. And the NGT has also mandated all the stakeholders to perform their duties properly. The state government and local governments, they have been authorized and directed to issue directives that all those non-biodegradable solid waste that is used in cement plants within their jurisdiction, and so far as energy which is derived from waste or waste to energy plants that is being utilized by the industries which are located within 100 kilometers of the vicinity of those cement plants. It has also been provided that buffer zones should be created. That means if there is a facility which is for disposal of solid waste, a buffer zone should be created. Within that buffer zone, no construction should take place, no residential or commercial construction should be there, and that buffer zone should be horticulturally beautified so that the evil effects of dumping of solid waste, they can be minimized. So far as the landfill sites are concerned, where the dumping of solid waste is being done, the court has directed that they should be subject to biostabilization within 6 weeks from the 6 months from the date of announcement of these this judgment by the court, and it shall be ensured that non-biodegradable waste and non-recyclable waste that should be used for construction of landfill, for construction of roads and embankments on all road projects within the country, and it should not be sent to the disposal sites. Court has made complete prohibition on open burning of waste on lands, including at landfill sites, and court has directed if anybody who violates this direction, he shall be liable to pay compensation of 5,000 for in case of simple burning, and if there is mass or bulk burning of waste, 25,000 fine shall be imposed upon that person. State Pollution Control Board and Central Pollution Control Board have been directed to report such incidents of burning the waste in open and initiate appropriate action against them. So therefore we find that the overall by the non-implementation of the rules enacted by the legislature, enacted by the central government, that is the solid waste management rules, the court has issued detailed guidelines regarding solid waste management. So students, we have discussed today solid waste management rules 2016, wherein we have discussed the responsibilities of waste generators, manufacturers. We have discussed the responsibilities of bodies, the urban local bodies. We have discussed the duties of various ministries of the union and ministries of the state. And we have also discussed how these rules have not been implemented properly and how the judiciary had to intervene for the proper implementation of these rules. Thank you.